So anyways, demonstrating and teaching. A contract I didn't get, but I always like to talk about when we first started. There was a helicopter maintenance company down in Texas that has mechanics in airports all around the world. And their issue was, how do you update mechanics on safety and repair kinds of things? And helicopters are pretty important. All right. If all of a sudden some valve manufacturer changes the hydraulic pressure required to operate this valve, you've got to update everybody. And if you think about the traditional way of sending out drawings and making phone calls, traveling, having trainers going out, all the expense of that, imagine if you could get everybody, all the mechanics in the world to go through one presentation and learn about the change in this valve and how to do maintenance with it, okay? Powerful kind of thing. You can do that kind of work, and that would have been fun. They were an old school company and just didn't trust the technology. They decided not to do it. They couldn't trust the technology. But maybe I didn't have the sales skills, I don't know. But I really would have loved to do that. But that'd be a really fascinating thing to do. And if you look at, there's so many different training and teaching webinars out there. A lot of good stuff you can do. And the platform, very easily, if you've got good training design, if you know how to do that, you can put together a good presentation. Couple things that most people run into trouble with when they are trainers. I had to reteach. I'm an old seminar and group facilitator. And one of the big things I got taught very early on is ask people, so tell me how you feel about something. That question does not translate to a webinar. It's impossible. It doesn't work, okay? You can't do that. But you can do presentations. You can have the interaction like we've had by actually, a lot of the platforms, you can actually have a person, what they call raise your hand, or it's called something like that. Person indicates they have a question or a comment they want to make. You can ask them to, you can actually open up their individual line, and the two of you can have a conversation, ask questions back and forth, and the rest of your audience, regardless of where they are in the world, gets to hear it. Somebody mentioned they wanted to do webinars about QuickBooks. I actually got to hear one, a guy did. He's an accountant. He was a horrible presenter. It was I don't remember his name, but it was absolutely awful. The first mistake he made, he had 20 people on his webinar, and he opened up the phone lines for all 20 of them. The noise was just unbelievable. You've got room noise. You got people at home, their dogs walk in and bark, or their kids walk in and say, Daddy, Daddy, I want to play. All this kind of stuff, and it all happens. It's awful. Just, mute these people right away. So one of the things, we don't use open mic except in very rare circumstances. Now, for training purposes, you can do it. Now, I mentioned this guy, Chip Lambert. One of the things that why his 2.5-hour webinars work is he will go out and he's got 20 people, let's say, on a webinar. He's got 30 people on a webinar. George is one of them. George does the raise your hand, he opens it up, and he'll have this great dialogue with them. And he will make sure that a question is answered. He will ask people to type in follow-up questions on the little question box so he can follow up with that. And that's how he keeps people interacting. Keeps it very, very interesting. And that's how he keeps his time, why he can go for so long, one of the reasons. Second thing he will do is he will do a little assignment. One of the things you can do with webinars, you can give people assignments. Now, since he's working in LinkedIn, one of the things he'll say is, we want to make sure you have a good profile on LinkedIn. That's one of the things you got to have for LinkedIn, right? So he goes through some points about what makes a good profile. And then he gives people 15 minutes or 8 minutes or something like that to actually go to their LinkedIn profile and change it. During those 8 minutes, he goes out into his attendees' profiles and reads them while they're working on them. And he looks at the changes they make. And so he comes back at the end, after his 8 minutes, and goes, George, your profile still sucks, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah. And people love it. They laugh. I mean, he will be that, not obnoxious, but he's that direct.
So it's the interactive.
It's the interactive, and that's what he does. And he goes out, and because it has the ability, again, the webinars have the ability to send out anything that's on your computer screen. He will actually go out and bring up that person's profile and say, George, look, here in this line, I want you to change these things. And all the attendees get to see that. What a powerful training tool. Fun. Okay, Brian?
Mike, I have a question. So you said that how are you feeling doesn't translate. Why not?
Because you can't have an audience to respond. All right, if I'm in a group, the purpose of asking the question of how the group feels,
Not necessarily, I mean,
or even a small group, even a small group.
how can they not respond? Are you saying there's no phone connection?
Oh, there's a phone connection, but once you get above 3 or 4 people opening up the phone lines, it becomes so noisy that it just disrupts.
Maybe
and the second-
unmuting okay.
So I can unmute one at a time.
Okay, there's a technology that,
Yeah.
there's a technology I have experienced that allows you to control that, not them. Okay, so it's a function of them not muting, then all of a sudden the background noise is.
Oh, I can mute them as well. In fact, I control that. All right, but the online doesn't work well for people to. When I ask the question, "How do you feel?" when I'm facilitating a group. All right, the idea is to not only just have people interact with me, but to interact with each other. That's what I'm doing with that kind of question, and it just doesn't work.
People call in on their cell phones, everything else.
Yeah.
Car window open.
Yeah, there's so many things. Yeah, Phil.
The noise.
Yeah.
I was on a webinar just last week that used interactivity pretty well. The speaker was trying to gauge if the audience was with him. You'll get it, you'll get it. And of course, you can't do that with the phone lines over. He said, hey, just type in okay, you get it. And then, 30 seconds later, okay, I got a whole bunch of okay, so I think we're good, let's move on.
Yeah. Chip, for example. George, did you get it? Yeah, type in okay. Yeah. So we do it. All right. The next one, for supporting customers. Like training and demonstrating, you can support customers by having the call-ins, these call-in webinars, the Q&A kinds of things, really work really well. Where you get to actually bring your customers and say, talk about whatever you want. Huge credibility builder very quickly. It works really well. You can also do things, you can demonstrate, you can talk about customer issues. You can I actually saw one person, I didn't do this, I attended this webinar. They actually were taking Twitters as people came in and from customers and actually responding to those online during this Q&A. There's all kinds of things you can do with that. So. And then selling and order taking. A couple things about selling with webinars. You can do it. And let me go to the next graphic here. I'll come back to I'm going to talk about a sales funnel here in a couple of minutes. So I'll come back to this. But the thing about selling is until you've had a couple contacts with a person, you can't do a selling webinar with them, with an individual or group. You have to have a number of contacts at that point. And the person has to know ahead of time that you're there to either, number one, bring them up to date on features and benefits of a particular product that they have expressed interest in, or you've got an actual proposal that you're making. So in essence, you've got an outline of a proposal. Scope of work, pricing, outcomes, all those kinds of things. But people have to opt into that to you in a very clear way to make a sales webinar work. If not, you end up looking like that car salesman trying to close you in 30 seconds. All right, so just a little bit about some basic things about what inbound marketing is about and why webinars fit into this thing. First of all, you get a chance to really target your audience. In fact, if anything, most people try and reach out to too broad of an audience end up not getting anybody. If you don't, I hear a lot of people say, my service or my product works for everyone in the world. No, it doesn't, okay? By definition. All right? So have a good concept of targeting. If you have the ability to reach out to people with using good keywords, good SEO kinds of capabilities, that's critical in your messaging. So the second thing about inbound marketing is that webinars are very easy to watch. And I used to have, when I first started the business, one of the services we did is, we would take all of the questions when people called in ahead of time going, I can't find my link, I can't get on, my phone doesn't work, and we would work the attendees through all these questions. And I would get anywhere from 10 to 15 questions before a webinar. Now if I get one, I'm lucky. So many people are just used to the technology. They've really learned it. I don't have to do much of that. We still get, I lost my link, can you resend me one? But that's more of, your spam filter ate it. So it's easy for people to view it, to get to it. You can share links with people, sometimes live, sometimes just the list there, to move them in a call to action to some other place. And you also, people are used to seeing them in all kinds of different media. People do a lot of Twitter about webinars. Just saw this, check out the recording. You can use the tiny URL, the bud URL kind of things to make it easy for people to find it. But it works really well for this. It's very easy to put it out in different media. In fact, you need to put it out in different media to bring a good audience. You don't want to choose one media. Okay, the question is, can you use video during a webinar presentation to illustrate something or to teach?
Or to be seen during the webinar as opposed to just putting up PowerPoint slides.
So to actually be seen, they're seeing you as a presenter instead of the slides. Couple comments about that. First of all, streaming video online still doesn't work that well.
Okay.
And we tend not to do it. Now, I've seen people take small clips and show like 15 or 30 second stuff, and maybe it comes through okay, but you're going to watch, number one, if there's a lot of action in the video, it won't work. Basically, you've got video running at 30 frames per second, and the typical internet's running 15 to 20.
Okay.
And you might have a great setup. You might have the powerful sound cards and all kinds of things to really ramp the thing through. Don't have the bandwidth to handle video well. So it's the person watching it who looks, they say, oh, it's an ugly video, I don't like it.
Even Ustream though, Mike, isn't that kind of changing it?
Ustream's really starting to up the ante. They're making a lot of improvements. A lot of the platforms, because in essence, screen sharing is a video is a video technology in and of itself. So you got this running at so many frames, and then you've got trying to capture something at so many frames, and those frames never line up. It's just difficult. And now the other thing about video that I find is personal opinion. Most people who do video, and they end up becoming a talking head. They're doing it for their own aggrandizement as opposed to thinking about their audience. Most people don't come to webinars to watch somebody, okay? They don't go to a webinar to see me for an hour. Who cares about me, what I look like? They want the content, they want the information, they want to be able to interact. So the other thing about video is it's an expense that you oftentimes don't need.
How about music? Does that come through a webinar fairly easily, or does that?
It's the thing about music, no, it typically doesn't, not because it can't, is that what you've got to set up, you actually need to have a very good sound mixer on the side that you're running through, and you're controlling the sound through that, and that you hope that people are listening to you on a VoIP or some kind of digital phone system as opposed to an analog. If they're on, and they're not on a cell phone, because cell phones are hell on webinars. All right, so it makes it difficult. All right, I've seen a lot of people, what they try to do, they take a microphone and put it in front of their computer speaker and try and broadcast that. Oh, terrible, awful. And they think, well, it's entertaining. No, they're all complaining about how ugly it is.
So maybe a podcast might be better for something like that?
It could, yeah. So, George?
What about animation on your PowerPoint?
The presentation with the guys in Germany, there was about a 1 second delay between my speaker and what they saw. Now, we actually worked on the connection to build that. I've had people talk about 5 and 10 second delays between the time you index, you hit the button and you go to another image. Well, it's a PowerPoint slide, a picture, a JPEG or something, anything, could take up to 10 seconds. The biggest issue about images is they're high bandwidth. One of the problems if you go out, if you show, I went out on the website and showed you that's just a web page I had queued up. One of the terrible things, Chip, my friend, the guy who does the LinkedIn training, he goes out onto a web page that looks at somebody's LinkedIn profile. Well, one of the things LinkedIn does is they have ads running over in the left-hand column. And those are eating up a huge amount of bandwidth, and so all of a sudden it's taking him 5 seconds to move from one page to another one. So bandwidth, based on the amount of image you have, just the size of the image, okay? And web pages take up a huge amount of, they're just big, okay? It just slows everything down. So one other thing about video I've seen people try and do, and they don't do it very well. People have tried to do a mix of video and live. So they say, okay, I've got this 3-minute presentation on a particular topic. How to do da-da-da. And I'm going to run this video, then come back on live and ask questions. The responses from audience tend to be, it's real disjointed, and they can't ask questions, they can't interact with the video. And so I don't find video as a communication means for a webinar, given the purposes that we talked about. It's not an entertainment medium. It doesn't translate well, so I tend not to use it. The stuff that, for example, that people are doing, GoToWebinar is working real hard on beating the video game. Rob's been doing some great work on improving video. He's doing some great stuff. And so, you know, I think one of the things we're going to say, we're going to start seeing this blend between video casts and webinars, you know, which basically is still images, start to go like this. We're going to start to see a blending over the next couple of years. So what I'm saying today might not be true 2 years from now. A couple other points about this, and you know, the question, you heard me a lot about building trust. And so what are the basic ways you build trust? Number one, you share knowledge. Number two, you share your experience. Webinars give you a chance, especially through demonstrations and some of those early stage kinds of things, that you can show a lot of your experience. The experience of yourself, your company, your partners, whatever. All right, the third thing, what are you actually capable of doing? What are you able to accomplish? You can show people what you've done. You can talk about case studies, what you've actually accomplished. Third thing is you try and share what your personal goals are. It helps you weed out the target market people or the wrong people in your target market. The next one is you share your history. How long have you been around? What your beliefs are as an individual, because people make decisions about those kinds of things. All right. The thing that about inbound marketing that I start talking to some people about using social media, and they forget the 4 things. You remember the 4 P's in marketing? All right. Well, I'm changing one of the first one. First one used to be place. Now I'm calling it people place, because the internet is a place of people. All right. But you're targeting a message to the right group at the right time, and that you're on the right site. That you actually know where those people are. You give product information, information that educates and solves problems. So many webinars I see, the information, you go, so what? How does it help me get something I don't have now? What's in it for me? Third, pricing. The best thing that tends to work is a combination of free and paid. Unless you're not in the business of selling paid webinars. And I think a lot of people are trying to be in the business of paid webinars when they shouldn't. What they're really trying to go to is an end game of something that has a high value. And so it's worth giving away stuff for free to get people to that point where they'll sign up. People who do consulting contracts use this a lot. Or coaching, all right? And then last, the 4P, the promotion. Through email, through social media, kinds of things. Through your own personal connections, the kind of things I talked about with the woman who did the branding, what she did, okay? So those still apply, and you need to understand, hopefully you've got a good idea in your head ahead of time, what those things are for yourself. So questions about that? I want to try and go through a couple of things briefly. So. All right, now where do webinars fit in the sales funnel? I want to give a little credit. This graphic here is from a friend of ours, Dave Westfall, who's here in town. He's an SEO expert, also does some business coaching, does some startup things. That red's kind of hard to read. I apologize if I have to read. At the top, this is a typical funnel. And what Dave talks about when this happens to deal with how websites sell, right? But the first one, you figure out you're trying to fill the funnel. And the first thing where webinars fit in that red zone is the thought leadership things fit. You're trying to start to fill the funnel. Lead generation fits near just before, right here, just before you get to developing leads. Demonstrations really work, informing people about things. So those kinds of, the purposes there, webinars that are of that fit up here, where you're first trying to put large number of people. I apologize for that red. Can you read those? Yeah, the first one says, this slide should be in your handout. Oh, you can't read it either? All right, I will get everybody, Dave gave me permission to send this out, so I will get this to everybody. But the first one reads, unique visitors to the website. And then there's a number of 1,000 behind it. Now, one of the things, Dave, the typical numbers you see on conversion rates for people typically going to a website, what he's saying is 0.33% of the people who visit a website for the first time ever buy something. And I'll use the word, I'll determine buy to mean purchase, sign up, donate, whatever. Okay. 0.33. So 0.3% ever act the way you want them the first time they visit a site. All right. Oops. The second line, it says they're repeat visitors. They come back for a second time and they bookmark the site. And then the third thing is they start becoming interested and they start responding to a call to action. That call to action could be download a paper, or a checklist, or watch a video. Now, one of the things you do with video or with webinars, because you can record webinars, you can take that recording, post it on your website, and let people watch it. Or you might offer them the slides. Okay.
What are the percentages attached to those?
Okay. The percentage over here, the first one is 0.33%, and what Dave is measuring here is down at the bottom. He said 3 people out of the 1,000 actually end up buying. So the percentages are 3 divided by whatever number is here. All right.
1 person buys.
Yeah. So the very first visit, only 0.3 will buy something. If they revisit, your conversion rate jumps to 1%, 3 people out of 300. And these are backed up by some research. The third one is that they actually take a call to action. 2% will convert to a sale. Notice that one of the things you're trying to do with a typical website, if you're trying to fill a funnel, people got to find your website. They can find a website a lot more easily if you are putting information out there that's credible, that's enjoyable, that helps them solve problems. And this is where webinars fit in. I think most webinars should be done in the early stages of filling the funnel. That's where they probably have the greatest bang for the buck. I don't mean you can't use them more, but they tend to be the areas where they best fit. Make sense? Question about that? Susan?
Yeah, but looking at the numbers, at number 3, where you have the interested calls to action,
Yeah.
saying that's out of 200, but 1% of the 300 and the line above would be only 3, right?
Yeah, 3 by here. So down here, 3 divided into 200 is roughly 2%. He rounded it.
Oh, it's, okay, so you're taking those 3 that buy on the bottom of the green section.
Yes.
Okay, got
Yeah.
it, got it.
Basically what it's saying is people move through the funnel, there's a higher probability they're going to buy.
Right.
Okay? That's what I said. So I apologize for the broadcast of this thing. So anyways, the point is most webinars fit into the early part of the filling the funnel. You get down here to the second thing where you're actually starting to get a serious lead. And a lead is, number one, is something that you and other people in your organization have agreed to as a lead. Because a lot of people don't. In fact, most people don't. The second thing is that person has actually in some way said to you, I am interested enough in what you want for you to contact me. You can contact me by sharing some more information. I might sign up for a special webinar. I might sign up for a special book. An interesting sales tactic that authors use. they sell a part of a book for like $10. You go buy an ebook, you run a Kindle. They might sell you the first 3 chapters, things like that. And then bring you to a point of buying the whole book or buying a series, a training package, whatever, okay? As you move down through pre-qualification and needs analysis, webinars don't work very well here. And the reason being, at some point in time, there needs to be more and more individual interaction. And so, unless, as I said, on the selling kind of webinars, that you have somebody who is very clearly opted into you, said, I want you to give me the features and benefits, I want to hear your proposal, I want to know what your price is, I'm willing to talk contract at some level. And unless you've gotten that feel, don't do a webinar. Okay? Enough said about that. Any questions about that? The question is, the conversion rates are for visitors to a website. They're not much different for a webinar. And let me just briefly, for a first email or for a first contact, if there's been no warm-up of the audience, it tends to be that 1/3 to 1/4 of 1% who even bother, who will register. All right. Once you do a second email, a third email, some other kind of contacts, you start going up. I would say, there's a guy known named Mike Agron who does a lot of research in this area and does informational webinars for companies. And his numbers are, he will do an email blast of 10,000 people. Out of that, he will get 500 to indicate an interest. They indicate an interest by opening up the invite and actually reading it, and maybe going to the first registration page. So you're at 5% after you've warmed them up. He gets out of that roughly 250 then who will actually register. All right, and this is for a free informational webinar. So far in conversion rates on 10,000, you're at 250, you're about 2.5%, or excuse me, 0.25%. All right. And when he gets down to, he'll get out of that 250 who actually register, a half to 2/3 will show up. Because things happen. Life happens, so whatever. So those are the kind of conversions you see. On a paid webinar, you cut those basically in half. So if you're charging $40 for something, unless it's something that's a real hot topic, if I was doing webinars for human resource people on the new EEO1 form that just got put out, or if I was doing a webinar on the fact that the Department of Labor decided not to give a grace period for the use of the Social Security number check, what do they call it, whether the online verification of Social Security numbers for new hires. All right, there's something I could charge whatever I want because everybody's got to have it. All right, and if I'm the first one out there, I will probably charge an arm and a leg. When there's 1,000 people out there doing it, I'm now down to $10. Okay, so people have actually showed up to your final webinar, and it's paid versus unpaid. The paid will be in the neighborhood of 5% conversion. All right, most free webinars though aren't trying to sell. So the question itself begs the issue. Is that when you get to a point where you've got somebody on a sales webinar, if they've opted into you and said, I want to be here, I understand you're going to make me an offer, and I'm glad to accept your offer and hear it, now your conversion rates are whatever your typical industry rate is. If I'm doing a webinar and making an offer for people to experience my product or service somehow, the conversion rates are in that 2 to 5% kind of range by the time you get to that point. And those tend to run regardless of the product or service. If I am actually in a sales mode, and I've got somebody who has agreed to be there, and we're doing this online because it's convenient for that. My conversion rate is whatever the typical conversion rate is for the industry when I'm at the point of negotiation. Okay? So for example, if anybody heard of HubSpot? Anybody heard of that? A couple of you have. Okay. HubSpot is a software package that's used for marketing, and it's a great product, by the way. And I talked to their head of sales, and they get to a point where when they're actually, their sales process, they warm people up to, they get to a point where somebody says, I am willing to accept a phone call. Now they have a live person call up, and George gets on the phone. We start talking about this, and during this conversation, George says to me, would it be okay if I made a proposal? And I say yes. And George comes back, I will be back to you tomorrow. What time could you meet? And we set that up. And we do this over a webinar, and because I went through this with HubSpot people. And I asked them, what's your conversion rate when you get me to this point? 25%. Because it's not that the webinars are so good, is that their sales process is so good, and they've warmed people up, and they've done the good needs analysis, they've got me comfortable, I've had a chance to research, do comparisons, all the stuff, okay, to where they get a 25% rate. And I said, how typical is that? And he says, it's about the industry average, it's a little higher because we work real hard at it, but it's about 25%. So, if that get to your question, I don't think sales webinars, when you start talking about conversion rates, fit most of the research. And I hear what people say, they're trying to sell me something. Technically for me, when I use the word sale, it means something different. I might be trying to interest you and get you to act to get closer to an actual transaction, to an actual economic transaction. So, okay, George?
The audience that uses a webinar, what level are they within a company? Are they the president level, the director type, are they just managers, worker bees? Where do they usually fit?
Okay, so the question is, can you attract different levels to different kind of webinars? All right, you can attract the C-level to a good webinar. You got to do some work ahead of time. I mean, first of all, you don't hit them cold. The warm-up, as we talked about, is much more important. And you've probably done, other work, if you're not published, and if you're not speaking, if you're not doing some other kinds of really credible outreach, you're probably not going to get a person to show up. C-level people respond real well to emails from their peers. So they'll respond to that more than just the cold email. And they never see the cold email. Their administrative assistant sees it and blocks it. So, but it's very doable. So, okay. Any other questions about this?
Number 4.
Yeah, when you get down to 4 and 5, the lead questioning, a demonstration or an educational thing is basically, you've got a number of people who they're not ready to commit to an offer, but they have said to you, I've got a bunch of questions about how this stuff works. Can I just learn more about what it is? A demonstration kind of webinar will work at that point. But you typically talk about smaller numbers to attend. So you're getting people where it's close to the sales process. We've got to watch our time here a little bit. So one more question.
It sounds like that you're talking more about the corporate environment and not like the information marketing environment, because from experience, from dealing with some of the people that I deal with, I think some of the percentages are quite different between those two markets.
Then maybe we could explore that. I have not found, I find that the ratios pretty much hold up, again, using the term sale in the way I describe it. All right. Not-for-profits, for example. My wife does a lot of consulting about not-for-profits, and what she's seen people use webinars for trying to get donors for fundraising and stuff, roughly the same.
Yeah, but that's still a business-related or corporation thing rather than the individual.
No, they're actually
marketer.
reaching out to the general public.
Yeah, we could talk about
Yeah, yeah. I think we ought to move on. So, okay, all right. In your handout, talk components of an online marketing strategy. Number one, you're monitoring what's going on out there, whether dialogues are going on in your space. Number two, you track where your customers and prospects are actually reading, you know where that is. You're actually publishing valuable content. your search engine optimizing, your social media optimizing, and you're establishing and measuring and results against goals. And there's nothing really new about that. And so let's talk about creating the webinar presentation. All right, these are the components I think we're going to talk about. First of all, you have the justification. Again, I said a lot of people don't do it or do them for the wrong reasons, or they don't have a reason. So the first thing is, what is your actual objective? Are you very clear on the objective you have? Do you know where you are in your sales, where you are in trying to reach out to your audience and what you're trying to do, so that you pick the right style of webinar? Second of all, you have some kind of return on investment calculation. You have some way of understanding, is this worth my time? Is it worth the investment? Because they do take a lot of time. Very, very well done webinars. I mentioned my friend Mike Agron. His research says that people who do a real good job with webinars, for the first time being done, it's 1 hour for every minute of presentation. So if you're doing a 1 hour webinar, you're going to spend 60 hours on the whole process. Yeah, that's a lot. So you better be ready. And I talk about efforts and resources versus the end game. When I talk about the end game, what I mean is, what is it you're trying to sell or have happen? I might have one person that I know is a career coach. His end game, what he's actually selling, is a consulting contract that goes for a year that's valued at $6,000. And what he does is he will do webinars. He does media advertising. He's got an ad that runs in the Wall Street Journal, and he brings people in, and he converts people, and he charges $49 for a total of 6 hours on a webinar. And he'll get enough barely to cover his cost, but there's no return on it. It's a lot of work for no return. But out of that, he converts enough so that if he sells enough consulting contracts, he may sell $6,000 worth of consulting contract, and he spent $3,000 to do a webinar. He will do that all day. Make sense? So the end game is what you look at. And do you have that? Is it content or information that people want? And one of the questions I like to ask people when I start talking to them is, how do you know people are interested in your content? Typical things you see that are going on out there. First of all, there's just a lot of buzz out there in the media. It might be on TV, it might be on the print media, it could be legislative stuff, whatever it is. But somehow or another, first of all, there's just a lot of buzz, and people are interested in talking about this. Your friends are talking about it at cocktail parties and such. Second thing is that you're starting to already get some inbound messaging. People are sending you emails, or people are just calling you on the phone. They're downloading papers that you've put on your website. Something is telling you that people have enough interest that there's enough actual pull. All right. Third thing is that there's some actual marketing data you've got. You've done some surveys, or you've bought other people's surveys. There's a couple survey companies out there. Forrester is one that does a great amount of research on webinar usage and whether or not, what kinds of topics people go. They actually break their data down by industry. And they will do, sub-industries within retail and that kind of thing. It's very good data. All right. So the first part is you have a real justification. Second thing, the script. You start with people, a lot of people, presenters I know, they talk about a script and they say, I don't want to read my webinar. We're not talking about like a movie script where everybody has memorized the words, but you have a very detailed outline of what you want to cover. First of all, there's a title. It's search optimized with keyword kinds of things. Second of all, you have the key points that you're going to cover, and you outline those. Third thing is that you're able to tell people the benefits, what exactly they're going to learn. And so they differentiate between what is knowing how to do something or understanding more about it. How deep are you going to take them? In terms of that, you actually identify ahead of time. What are the kinds of stories and experiences you're going to share? Case studies, conversations with people, those kind of things. You have those ahead of time. That you do have a list of best practices. Best practice, talking about best practices in a webinar are very, very important and are usually very attractive. Most people complain if you don't get them. One of the things people knock down on. That at the end of the webinar, you're going to have a summary, right? And then what are you going to have people do at the end of the webinar? Some kind of call to action. What are those going to be? Are you going to offer them something free? You're going to ask them to download a paper, whatever that is. Okay? What are they going to do different? So, questions so far? I mean, people can help you, first of all, with scripting. All right, to help you, or one of the things Judith will do, I mean, she can take, and believe me, there's a lot of people out there. Good PR firms, good marketing firms, there's a lot of people with these kinds of skills. All right, so the ability to, you sit there and go, I know I've got this message I want to put there, but I don't know how to get it organized. To be able to sit down and do a 1-hour interview with you about what is it, and start talking about all these things, and really build that, I can help you very quickly, build a script. All right. Some of this is the technology setup. We actually go through and check out people's equipment. So there's a lot of things you can do, to hire out with that. But if you can do it yourself, the hour per minute holds up. So, second thing about building the presentation is what kind of images they're going to use. Let me talk about what works, what tends not to work. And we've talked about videos, so I don't want to go over that anymore. But PowerPoint lists work very, very well. But you can use just about anything. And again, anything you can put on your computer screen will broadcast. Keep in mind that your audience tends to actually like simpler kinds of things. I've got some slides in here that I purposely made poorly, as we'll get to a little later. They're just too crowded. You'll get a chance to see what I mean. Other thing I see people use is big pictures. And there's a trend in webinars going on where people will have a slide that is the entire screen is filled with a big picture that's very busy, and they'll have one word or two words on the entire screen, and they'll talk to those words. And the response I get when we did our survey to those kinds of things was, it's entertaining a bit, but at some point they're going, it's not enough information. I want an outline. People like outlines. So having things that are lists really help people. And there's, the term death by PowerPoint tends to, lots of times, is that people are using very ugly slides. So pictures do work. I had that little picture of the baby holding her head, years before. Kind of fun. All right. Be able to show documents. I put a document on the screen right off of a web page. I'm going to show basically what's an Excel spreadsheet here in a couple minutes. All right. Showing web pages. All right. Showing technical drawings. The one thing you got to watch is when you do anything that's complex. Like I wish if in a perfect world I would have had a chance to come in this room and put those slides up on the screen and actually see how they broadcast. When we do rehearsals, that's what we do, because color rarely translates correctly. So, and you get a chance to see those kinds of things. So I look for the image. The big thing about any image is how much bandwidth it uses. The more complex, more interesting the picture is, the more bandwidth it uses. It just eats up a lot of bandwidth. Okay? I actually run a resource meter when I'm monitoring a webinar, and I may be going along at a very low level, and somebody opens up a web page. 10 times bandwidth usage is very normal. Now here's a particular number. If you can actually use, if you're working in Windows, use Task Manager, and you go to the resource page and you got a couple of graphs. You can actually watch the amount of flow through the network that you're on at that point in time. And this is a word from GoToWebinar. If the broadcast rate, the in and out, back and forth, is over 400K per second, it will start breaking down. You ever been on a webinar, all of a sudden it sounds like somebody sounds like they're a robot? That means they're pushing too much image and too much communication through the pipeline. Most people have got, right now, if I'm doing a webinar, I would not have these many things open up. I minimize the number of things I've got on my screen. So watch your drawings. They will tend to bring a webinar down. Just shut the thing down. So I tend to not use a lot of big images because they eat a lot of bandwidth. The other thing, they can be distracting. And my friends who are the graphic artists don't like me to say that, but you've got to look at how well things are going to work. And do they really support the message you got? So when we're outlining, we've actually put together all these things ahead of time. We know what we're going to cover. All right, how do you increase engagement, interaction? We've talked a lot about interaction, and we've talked about polls, first of all. So unless there's more questions about using polls, I'll move on. Okay. Direct questions to attendees, then publish the results. All right. You can actually, give people a question and ask them to respond back. You can actually open up, as I said, open up the phone line. The third one that works really well is interview an expert. Bring on an expert, all right, in something. And even if it's just a 5-minute case study, in fact, if you in lead generation webinars, bringing on an outside expert has so much power. Because you're assuming you're going to have customers at some point who want to buy your product. When they hear somebody else actually used it, here's the benefit they've got, all those kinds of things, has a huge impact, a very big impact. Actually today, I was hoping to actually have the woman who did the branding webinar get on the phone with us and actually talk for a couple minutes, but didn't work. So. Direct a question to a single attendee, I said. Play some video clips. Again, 30 seconds, you can do it, and not a lot of motion in them. Some I've seen work are small little interview questions where somebody is simply sitting and, Priyan, he and I are just talking, and I say, Priyan, tell me about the one thing that really upset you about presenters, okay? And we interact for 30 seconds, and we're just sitting talking. That can work, all right? Complete a form. Actually have people go out to a website and fill out a form, and then go back and look what they did with it. I could go back to Chip Lambert's thing where he actually goes out, update your profile in LinkedIn, for example. Annotation tools in GoToWebinar. I won't go through all these. There are some, and most of the platforms have it. They've got little tools where you can draw circles, you can put arrows by things to bring attention to them. You can zoom in and out. There's a variety of tools like that that we try and get people to learn how to use. Using a Q&A during the webinar. I've got a lot of people I know who don't like to take questions until the end because they lose control in the flow, and I understand that. But a lack of questions tend to make even the best presenter boring. It's just a fact of life. And then the open mic that we talked about, being able to, if you've got a small group, actually open up the mic to everybody. So, visiting web pages. Okay, you've got a slide like this, and I don't know, it should be in your handout. What I'm actually planning a webinar. I'll just go through the headlines real briefly, but I actually go through, and you'll be able to download this on the website. So, it's set up to where you put in, this thing is set up where you basically put in the date of the webinar, your targeted date, and all these dates along here. It actually creates a calendar, and this thing runs real long. It actually goes through and calculate, but then you can go through and actually change each of these numbers here, 70 days, that's from the date of the broadcast, and actually create a calendar. And what I use those for is if I've got a group that's doing a webinar, we just constantly update those to people. And you can share them in all kinds of different ways. So, okay, but one more minute. So the steps, first of all, in planning a webinar is we're looking at the target audience. We're looking at our quantitative and objectives and qualitative objectives for this. And we actually just schedule a time or date. And also, we build the management process. We actually go through who's responsible for what. I mean, who's doing everything. And this is a work planning session. So this will take, the first discussion, the way it usually works is it takes about a half hour to go through this form the first time. And then you come back 2 days later because there's usually a bunch of questions. And then it's another hour to walk through. Here's all the things, who's doing what, what's possible, what kind of roadblocks are there, okay? The next one is developing the script. And so I'm actually creating a 1 to 2 page, or my presenter is, depending how involved we are, a 1 to 2 page, oops, went too far. 1 to 2 page presentation outline, and that's being passed around to who it needs to be. And if you're inside of a company, most people forget to do this. And we actually go through, and we will, if you've got an outsider, you've got again a PR company or a marketing company or some outside group that's an expert, you'll share that script with them at that point in time. Say, what do you think? And get some input early on. So you can see why some of the time starts building up on these things. The next one, illustrating. We identify specific visuals. We start, 50 to 60 days ahead of time, only because it takes a while. If you've got to hire a graphic artist or something, it just takes a while to get things done. So these dates out here are approximate. I like to start planning a webinar 2 months ahead of time at least. I've done them in 4 weeks. Personal opinion, if it's less than 4 weeks, you're probably going to have a failure. Okay? So we're developing the script, the illustrations. The next step is actually some rehearsals. And this is an area where we see people actually fail a lot. They don't do rehearsals. And when I talk about a rehearsal, there's 2 kinds of rehearsal. The first one is a technical rehearsal. And this is where you actually go through and test all the equipment you have. If you've got your computer system, your networks, one of the things I like to do, I like to actually go into a client and try and shut down their network. And I will light up a bunch of computers and tie them in together and see how much stuff I can throw at this thing to see whether or not it's going to hold up, whether the amount of bandwidth that's being used will show up. And I've had some clients who've actually had to go out and replace routers because they didn't have the capacity that they thought they had. Fast 7 or 8 minutes and come back and we'll finish up this form.